services, training, investment, etc. Plus, we're trying to negotiate a similar agreement with China. Now, if we are successful, we would be the only country in the world with preferential access to China, India, and Europe through GSP+. No other country in the world has preferential access to the three large, the US is there as well, but three very large markets. So what does that do? It gives opportunities to our own exporters in terms of a much larger market than the 21 million people we have here. On top of that, the bigger gain is to leverage the trade investment nexus, i.e., you can tell people, come and locate in Sri Lanka and sell on a preferential basis to India, which is 20 miles away, China, which we are right in the middle of the maritime Silk Route, and there's infrastructure improvements which will facilitate movement of goods and services between China and Sri Lanka. And you can also sell into Europe. So that, and our locational advantage, our good international relations, our opportunity to leverage the evolving geopolitics of the Indian Ocean region, all that gives us a real opportunity, and the preferential access to these large markets kind of provides the framework within which we can leverage these positive factors. And let me just say a little bit more about trade agreements. One is you have to make sure you put your own framework at home to make sure your domestic producers are not too disadvantaged. So the government has introduced an anti-dumping bill. It has also introduced a Safeguard Provisions Act. And it is introducing a trade adjustment package to assist companies and workers who are being affected. So that is the framework you have to put in place before you go into these trade agreements and liberalize some of the sectors. The other fear is, how can a small country like Sri Lanka negotiate a positive outcome when you negotiate with countries like China and India? And there are well-tried principles for this. I mean, Mexico is the biggest gainer from NAFTA. New Zealand gains much more from its deal with Australia. How does that happen? Essentially, these agreements between large and small countries are based on the principle of non-reciprocity, i.e. the larger country does far, far more than the smaller country. How does that happen? When it comes to goods, the negative list of the smaller country is much, much longer than the negative list of the large country. Similarly, when it comes to services, the positive list of the larger country is much longer than the positive list of the small country. And the transition periods, if there is liberalization of the sector, the large country would do it in maybe 7 or 10 years, and the large country would do it in 3 or 5 years, the small country would do it in 7 or 10 years. I mean, I'm just picking some numbers, but essentially, the liberalization will be done much more quickly by the bigger country than the smaller country. So there are these well-tried techniques that can be built into these agreements, which can give the smaller country the opportunity to gain from these agreements. So obviously one has to negotiate to make sure that our interests are kind of attacking what's in that. I think you're talking Ragana, but positive agenda is pursued vigorously, as well as a defensive agenda as well. So given all that, it can be done. It can be done, but it requires clearly expertise and perseverance. So these are some of the things that are being done to address those drags that I was talking to now. And on education, training, and skills development, the government has this 13 years in school program where they're trying to make the last couple of years of education less academic and have sort of trades and technical education brought into the schooling system. Again, this is a long-term thing, but that's something we need to persevere with. That's so. What is the country going to look like in 2025, or what could it look like if we get things right? By the way, because you're all CEOs here, let me just one other issue I should mention before I get taking too much time. Before I get to what the country might look like, there is this perception that there is a shortage of labor. Now, in my view, there is really no shortage of labor. I know our population is, our demographics are beginning to move against us, but there is no real shortage of labor. It's just that we have far too much labor in the wrong places. We have 27% of our population in agriculture, giving us about 8% of GDP. Now, a team from Harvard, led by Professor Ricardo Hausman, reckon that for our level of development, we should have only about 15% of the labor force in agriculture. But people are behaving extremely rationally because we give free water, we give a very large fertilizer subsidy, and we give a guaranteed price. So what we do essentially is we trap, and the minister mentioned this, we trap people in low productivity, low income livelihoods. So we get their noses above water, but they really don't have a pathway to move any further up. Our poverty, absolute poverty level is very low. It's below 5% now. But if you increase the poverty line from what is about $1.30 to $2.50, about 25% of the people are below that. So we are getting people above the absolute poverty line, but trapping them in still pretty constrained circumstances. So people are behaving very rationally, but there is labor in low productivity activity, which needs to be shifted. Very easy to stand here and pontificate, extremely difficult to do politically. But I think but we have to have this in the back of our mind and keep pushing in the right direction. Gradually you have to create the conditions where you incentivize people to move from low productivity agriculture to higher productivity areas which need labor. Similarly, the public service. We have 1.5 million people, 17% of the workforce. Even Greece only had 15. So we are higher than that. Again, people are behaving extremely rationally because that is the only segment in the whole labor force which has a non-contributory pension. So until you have a national pension, and if you have a national pension, I suspect it will have to be contributory. So until you even out the playing field there, you're going to have a lot of young people just wanting to get into the public service. They're behaving rationally. So the incentives need to be changed. All this is politically difficult, it will take time, but we need to keep pushing in the right direction, and I think it's influential people like you all who have to keep taking this message out and making people understand that these are difficult things to do, but if we really want to get the country to where we want it to be in 2025, some of these things need to be addressed. Finally, what's the country going to look like in 2025? Let me be very quick. If you look at the Vision 2025 document, there is an economic corridor from Trincomalee through to Hamamatla. So if one starts in Trincomalee, there is now Subhana Durong, the company which did the master plan for the Megapolis project, has now done a master plan for Trincomalee development. And the idea is to work with Japan, India and Singapore to develop the area around Trincomalee. So that is intended not just to have the east, but also the hinterland in the Radharata as well. So you make that a kind of a loophole, and there's a development program. It's got an industrial zone, residential and commercial, real estate, tourism of course. So all that is there. Then you come, and the road is being developed in that area too. You come to Kandy, and Japan is doing a master plan. I think they've just about finished it. They're doing a master plan for Kandy. And again, there will be an industrial zone as well as real estate, etc. And cultural tourism. Then you come down the central highway which is being built. Bingaria, there's going to be an industrial zone in Bingaria, in the Northwest province, and you come down and you have the Megapolis project and Port City in Colombo. You go further down, you have in Kalutara, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, in the Millennium industrial zone, where there's a Thai company which is going to develop it. And you go further south, there are 2-3 tourism development. Delhi is going to be the largest one. And you go down to Hambantota, and you have the port and the industrial zone there. Now, I've also been somewhat confused by all the debate we had about the Hambantota port lease, because actually that is much, much more than leasing a port. 70 years after independence, the people of Monragal and Uva have very little. We've done very little for them. The people of Hambantota have some assets, but those assets are not working for them. So what this port lease does, and the industrial zone the Chinese are willing to build, is to give the opportunity to transform the life of those people. These were the heartlands of the JVP insurrections, and that was for a reason. And this gives us a chance to transform those areas. So this is not just a port lease. It's about transforming a lagging region in the country where we've had youth unrest on 2 occasions. So I think we need to look at the big picture. So that's roughly what Sri Lanka is going to look like. I should also say in the north there is a Palali Airport and Kankasantara Port are being upgraded, and the road network is being improved with a road between Manai and Trinco. So there's a tremendous amount of mega development projects. The plans are excellent, but where the jury is out is whether we're going to execute. That's really where the big question is. Can we get it done? And I think the people in this room, you have a big responsibility. Because if you sit back and say the government has to do it, I'm not so sure. Really, I think the private sector also has to take responsibility and take the lead and see what they can do, and not just leave it to government. And to really collectively lobby, because I think the tradition is for companies to go and cut deals for themselves. We need the private sector to operate as Sri Lanka Incorporated and get the ecosystems, the overall environment improved, so that you have opportunities for everybody. And to get balanced and inclusive growth, clearly what the minister talked about in terms of Enterprise Sri Lanka, Kamtardi, etc., those kinds of initiatives are also important to balance out the mega projects. So the plans are actually very encouraging, but as I say, what is still not certain is whether we can get it done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Indrajit Koomaraswamy, for clearly articulating the debilitating factors in Sri Lanka and also talking about the potential strategic accelerators on the roadmap. And as you mentioned, the big question is, can we really do it? And I think today's panel discussion is all about how we can be facilitators in this journey. We were looking forward to having you as one of the panel members, but I think unfortunately Dr. Koomaraswamy has to make a move. So we would like to really appreciate your time for being here with us today, and I think you really added enormous value to this August gathering. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being with us today. Once again, can I invite Professor Ajanta Dharmasiri and Mr. Dinesh Kamangada, President of PIMA, to give a token of appreciation. Can we have a big round of applause for our keynote speaker?